Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We have a very exciting session for us today, and I'm really looking forward to it. We have some special guests. We have Jennifer Eskew from Catholic Charities of Tennessee, and we have my colleague Chelsea Lafferty, who hasn't, I believe, participated yet, perhaps live with you all, but she's been a help to us behind the scenes, and she's going to introduce Jennifer based on their past work together. And then we also have a guest, Alice Pritchard, who will share one of her activities that really lends well to this topic that we're focusing on today, which is social emotional wellness in the home. So, when we put this together, we're thinking about our culturally, linguistically diverse students and families, but there's so much need right now, and part of today we'll be focusing on our own wellness as helpers and educators working with students and families and in our communities. So thank you all for joining us for another Friday webinar. I see people from all over the United States, from Missouri, Colorado, Arizona, Ohio, North Carolina, West Virginia, Alabama, Texas, Virginia, Illinois, Arkansas, New York, Ohio, Florida, Washington State, Connecticut. So I know I missed a few, but thank you for joining us. And I'm sure there are more of you joining since I asked you to give that shout out. So feel free to continue adding those comments, and we will have some engagement in today's webinar. So if you can't hear me right now, that's always a challenge, but I'll just highlight this. Computer audio seems to be the best choice in terms of getting that audio connection. As well, you will be muted based on the functionality of this webinar. And our questions box, it's a little bit unusual in the GoToWebinar system. We've learned that the questions box serves as our chat box. So while it may seem that you're writing a question, unfortunately, we can't, those aren't open and public to everyone in that questions box. So once we receive a question, my colleagues will be responding to them, and it may just be a yes or great or nice to see you, so that gets populated and then it becomes public. So that's the questions box is where you'll see what we might normally think of as our chat box. So thank you for joining us today, and we have some online resources that you will get this link many times throughout this presentation. It's the same link where you'll find all of our webinars archived with handouts and PowerPoints from our sessions. I believe this is maybe our 5th webinar, and we have a continued series. We're also really excited that our colleagues from the multilingual and dual language education area at Cal will be presenting, coming right up soon, a direct one on Spanish literacy on May 5th, Foundations of Dual Language, Fostering Spanish Language and Literacy, and then a special on Cal SciUp for dual language programs. So you can see those dates. Again, it's the same website at the top of your slide there today. And our colleagues are also doing a series on ed policy. So yesterday there was one on adult ESL and meeting the social distance challenges for adult ESL programs and educators. You can find that one. I believe it may not be up yet in an archived form, but it will be by early next week. And then coming right up next week, we have funding opportunities, thinking about the landscape right now with the federal departments and US education system. So we are looking forward to those as well. We know it's a full calendar, and we know that you also wear many hats. So to give our guests a little bit more information about how you're joining us today, we thought we would participate in a poll. And so you're just thinking, we know you wear many hats, but how are you joining us primarily today? So that should have reached your screens now as a poll. What is the role that you are mostly joining us today from? Okay, and I'll be able to share those results in just a moment. Okay, so I'm going to close the poll and should share those results. Looks like the majority of you are ESL teachers. We do have some social workers and other educators, but primarily today we're thinking about social emotional wellness, and I did think it was another aspect of all of for educators and social workers, and in particular our ESL teachers who work a lot with families, most perhaps directly often as the liaisons from a school system. So this topic will fit nicely. And I'm going to now pass it off to my colleague, Chelsea Lafferty. Hi, Chelsea.
Hi, thank you so much, Annie. So I will be leading you all in our kind of icebreaker warm-up activity, which is going to be a breathing activity. And this is just to get us ready for the topic that we're going to be discussing today, which can be a little heavy, but with Jennifer's wonderful guidance, we'll definitely be able to see the wonderful resources that she has. So we are going to be practicing bubble breathing today. And so a super easy and fun way to teach children how to breathe calmly is the bubble breathing or bubble blowing technique. You can do this technique outside using soapy bubble container and the wand, or you can just do it imagining that you're holding a wand with bubbles at the end of it. It's a great way for children to start practicing calm breathing in a non-threatening way. So have your children wait a few seconds before each bubble and eventually work your way to having him or her practice bubble breathing without the wand. Make sure you explain to your children or your students that the bubble breathing is a way to practice calm breathing, to develop a technique to help with their big emotions or help with emotional management. Remind your children or your students that this technique can be done at school or anywhere else without the bubble container or without the wand, just as a great way of calming down and relaxing. So I am going to lead us in this activity at this time. So now we are going to practice it to prepare yourselves for today's webinar. So for all of us, I would ask you to sit comfortably with your eyes closed. Begin by imagining you're holding a bubble wand. Breathe in deeply. Then, as you breathe out slowly and gently, imagine you are blowing bubbles into the room, and they are all around you. Imagine these bubbles are filled with peace, love, happiness, or a mixture of all three. And that you are filling the whole entire room with a peaceful, happy feeling. As you keep breathing slowly and blowing your imaginary bubbles, feel your body become calm and relaxed. I invite you to try it again. Breathe in deeply. Then, as you breathe out slowly and gently, imagine that you're blowing even more bubbles into the room. And there is so much joy, peacefulness, happiness all around you. So this is just one of many breathing exercises that are out there that many teachers and students and yoga teachers practice on the daily. We have provided a handout with these breathing exercise cards that you can use with any children in your life or with your students. So feel free to download those handouts and keep breathing in mind. How are we all feeling? Are we feeling pretty relaxed? Good. All right, let's go on to the next slide. So in today's agenda, we're going to do our introductions and our warm-up. I'm going to introduce Jennifer Eskew, who works at Catholic Charities of Tennessee, and she's going to take us through a really wonderful presentation. And then we're going to do a journal, daily journal activity with Dr. Alice, and then a brainstorming session at the very end to see what we're all working on right now, what works for us in our classrooms or in our homes. Next slide. So our goals and objectives for today, we do at Cal, we practice the SIOP model. So we do have content and language objectives. Our content objectives today are we will present and brainstorm resources and activities that promote social emotional wellness for ourselves, as well as our students, their families, and our community as a whole. Language objectives. We will talk and chat about how to promote social emotional wellness as well. So our second poll that we're going to do today, we'd really love to know the majority of your students out there right now, are they coming to you as newcomers, unaccompanied minors, refugees, second generation immigrants, or no single majority group? All right, our poll is in. So a majority of our students are coming as newcomers to our classrooms or our communities. Some second is second generation migrants. Oh, sorry, no, second is no single majority group, all of the above. So it sounds like we're getting tons and tons of just all of the above. So thank you so much for sharing. That gives us good insight to how to tailor our presentation for today. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you all to Jennifer Eskew, who has been a mentor in my life personally. I had the privilege of working under Jennifer before coming to Cal a few years back. So Jennifer specializes in development of trauma-informed and resilience-focused programs for multicultural populations. She holds a bachelor's degree in social work and a master's in intercultural studies, which she utilizes on the daily in her role as the youth and elders supervisor for the Refugee Services Department at Catholic Charities of Tennessee, a role she has held for close to 18 years. So Jennifer, thank you, Jennifer, so much for joining us today. It is so nice to hear from you, and I'll let you go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Chelsea. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to be here. I am passionate about building resilience in our children and supporting their caregivers, which in the way that we talk about it includes teachers, social workers, and their parents, as they work to support social emotional wellness, something that our current crisis makes both challenging and really important. So on the next slide, you'll see our goals for the day. I'm going to start by providing an overview of social emotional wellness and the impact of trauma and toxic stress on children. Then I'll move on to the vital role of self-care, self-awareness, and self-regulation in caregivers. The bulk of the presentation will be devoted to information and activities that can be implemented in the home to address each of the 3 domains of social emotional well-being. And then I'll hand it back over to Cal staff. So for now, let's jump right in. We'll go to the next slide. Okay, so the situation right now with COVID-19 is creating a global traumatic event. It's taken what we've considered normal life all over the world and dramatically changed it. All of the things that we thought we could rely on being true, all of our old routines and systems have been shaken. A pandemic is a pretty scary thing. And beyond the fear of getting sick or of losing someone we love, we're dealing with the ripple effects, school closures, social isolation, loss of income for a lot of people. Some of us, depending on our internal and external situations, resources, and support, are going to experience this as tolerable stress. I don't know that any of us are really going to experience it as positive stress, but hopefully tolerable stress. And that's good for us. It creates an opportunity for growth. And with many of your immigrant and refugee students and families, you might see that they're actually better equipped than some native-born children and families to cope with and thrive in the current crisis. They've seen crisis before, and it hasn't upended their worldview because past experience has not taught them that the world will be safe, predictable, and comfortable. They've lived this story before, and they've come out the other end with more resources and with strong survival skills. For others, though, it's going to overwhelm our ability to cope, and it can create toxic stress. Through research, we know the serious and potentially lasting impact of toxic stress on health, academic, and social outcomes for children. Trauma is inherent in the refugee experience, which is at the heart of my professional experience, and also at the heart of many immigrant experiences as well. For children and families who haven't had the opportunity to fully heal from that trauma, this experience could be adding another layer of toxic stress. And instead of that growth that comes from tolerable stress, you see a further eroding of coping skills and more damage to social and emotional well-being. Take a look at the next slide. And we're going to talk about the way that our brains process information. So this slide shows how our brain works under typical conditions. So generally, in a new situation, each of us observes, takes in information, makes meaning, and chooses a fitting response. So for example, with most kids, when they hear a loud noise, they're going to pause, they're going to try to figure out what it was, and assuming it's not something dangerous, they're just going to go about their day. The next slide will show us what happens when our brain faces danger. And under those conditions, our brain operates a little differently. So faced with danger, our brains make the best judgments they can very quickly based on your senses. So what you hear, what you see, taste, smell, and feel, as well as what your brain has learned over time about the signals of danger. Once a situation is perceived as dangerous, the brain helps us survive by skipping some responses and by speeding up others. So let's go back to that loud noise. Say you happen to hear it while you're walking by a construction site, a block of wood suddenly hits the sidewalk in front of you. You may jump out of the way before you think about it. There was no conscious thought to say, oh, I better move out of the way. Instead of being on the main road, your brain puts you on the express road. And on the express road, you're not thinking critically. There's no reasoning, no processing, no integrating. There's only survival. Move on to the next slide. We'll know that many years ago, a psychologist named Abraham Maslow proposed that certain needs drive behavior. According to his theory, people are driven to get their needs met in a hierarchy, and we must have our basic or lower level needs met first before we think about those higher level needs. In that sense, lower level needs are always going to win. Meeting basic survival needs, for example, will always trump our needs for things like achievement. And right now, our situation means that we're all kind of living in some of those lower levels, those physiological and safety needs. So I want you to take all of your expectations for yourself, for your students, and kind of just lower them. Let them go, kind of breathe them out. We'll come back to those higher expectations later in a different time. But right now, what we wanted to do is to focus on activities that build a child's capacity to feel safe in this time. So we'll go to the next slide. The good news is that we know how to build coping skills and resilience, even in the face of chronic and ongoing trauma. So you see a picture of a book there. In our program, we use the ARC model, which is developed by Blaustein and Kinneberg, sort of our Bible, and a lot of the activities and information that I'm going to present are adapted from that. And it looks through social emotional wellness through 3 domains: attachment, regulation, and self-competency. Before we get into each of those domains and the activities that you can do to support them, I do want to say a word about self-care. We'll go to the next slide. So to support social and emotional well-being in children, it's important that you feel supported and that you have the tools to manage your own feelings. And let's face it, we all have a lot of feelings right now. What we're doing is hard. Our children aren't alone in having their world upended, and it's very difficult to support another person when you are overwhelmed, stressed, exhausted, or just generally not in a good place. For this reason, like a flight attendant, I'm reminding you to put on your own oxygen mask before helping someone else. Now, when some people hear the term self-care, they think of treating themselves or taking a little break from their regular life, but that's not really it at all. It's actually a skill that allows you to focus on your own basic needs for safety, security, connection to others, and regulation. It's making your daily life manageable so that you don't need to escape from it. The more in control, regulated, and competent you feel, the more likely you will be able to feel effective in caring for children, and the more likely the children in your lives will be able to experience you as a safe resource. So the first step in doing that is acknowledging what makes a hard day for you. What are the things that push your buttons? They are not going to stop happening. We are all in the house together for the foreseeable future. So if anything, those things are probably going to get worse. Acknowledge what they are, allow yourself permission to feel what you feel about them, and then begin to build a realistic self-care toolbox. We'll talk about that starting on the next slide. When we know what pushes our buttons, we can then prepare for those moments in advance. So for instance, I know that with one of my daughters, math homework is just our kryptonite. It's going to be hard and it's just not magically going to get better. So whenever I know it's time to do math with her, I need to, have a plan, start with some self-talk. Jennifer, you are good at math. You are a nice mom. You can do this. This slide gives you some tools and suggestions for how you might prepare when you know you're facing something that's going to push your buttons or it's going to be hard. If you have things to add to the list, you can share in the chat box. You can maybe make a note to yourself. But then sometimes we also know, we can move on to the next slide. Sometimes those hard moments, they catch us off guard. So for those, you're going to want to have in your pocket tools. And it's important that these tools are simple and concrete. So these are strategies that help us keep our thinking brain engaged, that help keep us on the main road instead of the express road. Keeps our bodies regulated, and it keeps us on the main road. We're going to practice one of them now. We can go ahead and see the instructions for that on the next slide. So I want each of you to take a moment and think about something stressful that happened this week. Notice what happens in your body as you think about it. If you feel your shoulders or your jaw getting tight, if you feel your breathing becoming more shallow. So now we're going to do just a really simple breathing activity. So I want everyone to breathe in, raise your arms straight out from your side, palms facing up towards the sky, and then when you breathe out, just let your arms collapse back down to where you can. So then what happens in your body as you do this? Do you notice any changes? The in your pocket strategies, what we want from them is that they lead to changes in your emotional or physical state in moments of stress, because you're actively doing something to shift it. So it's not solving all your problems or making them go away, but it's just changing your energy a little bit and helping you reconnect to that main road. And we can see on the next slide, research also shows that stress doesn't stop or go away the moment the situation has passed. Often our body and mind continue to experience the impact of the event or situation that's occurred. Because of this, it's important to build both the in-your-pocket strategies and the recovery skills, or the things that you do to help yourself after a stressful situation is over. So let's go back to your earlier memory of the stressful thing that happened this week. Did you do anything to help yourself recover? I like to go on a walk, to take a bath, to read a book, to eat ice cream. So not all of our recovery tools are always the most healthy thing, but we try to, exercise could be better than eating a ton of ice cream, maybe. Not as good though. Here are some other possible recovery tools. And again, if you have anything else to add, feel free to make note of those. And then finally, we'll see on our next slide, beyond the skills that we wrap around specific stressful moments, those things we know push our buttons, all of us need tools, strategies, and supports that are in place every day in an ongoing way. Here are some examples of ongoing self-care activities: getting enough sleep, eating well, making time for yourself somewhere in your home and in your day. And then you can think about other things you do that help you just maintain and stay on that main road on a daily basis. Now that your oxygen masks are on, we're going to get into activities to support social, emotional well-being for your children at home. I've intentionally chosen activities that are pretty low tech, although you can use tools like Flipgrid or other online patterns to add a digital component if you like, but I really wanted to make sure that all of them can be done in a variety of contexts and languages and without any special supplies. So on the next slide, we'll see the first domain. And that first domain of social emotional wellness in the ARC model is attachment. And there's a reason it's first. The single most important factor in developing resilience in children is to have a stable and committed relationship with a supportive parent, caregiver, or other adult. If you take nothing else away from today, I want it to be this. Connection matters, and it matters most. When you have to make a choice, and you will, whether it's about getting the math assignment perfect, marking everything off your to-do list, or engaging in a power struggle with a headstrong 12-year-old, not that I know anything about that, I want you to choose connection. All relationships are strengthened by positive experiences. The more pleasurable experiences and moments of connection you share with the children in your lives, the easier it's going to be to ride this roller coaster of isolation and quarantine and manage the moments of challenge and disconnection that will inevitably come. So on the next slide, we see one of our go-to activities. It's a really easy starting place. Commit just 5 to 5 minutes of positive connection with the children in your life each day. Just 5 minutes. We're not trying to accomplish anything or change anyone. The only goal is joy. We call these 5 minutes of joy activities. And here are some that we use in our programs and at my house. So take some time to sit with your child or with your students over Zoom or whatever platform you're using and come up with as many 5 minutes of joy activities as you can. You can try a new one each day. You can make it a daily challenge on Flipgrid. You can pull one out of the jar. Just keep referring back to your list. In my home, we keep going back to the Just Dance videos on YouTube. We've labeled those videos bringers of joy. So if ideas are already coming to you, again, feel free to share. On the next slide, we will see another very simple activity that might work well for teachers in a class. And we just call it circles. You start by having the child draw a spiral or a series of concentric circles. And by the way, just the act of drawing circles alone, for whatever reason, is naturally a soothing and calming activity. Then you have the child put themselves in the middle. And so my girls did this activity, and they took pictures of it outside, hence the shadow. So you can kind of see an example. And then you have them think of all the important people in their lives. The people that make them laugh, make them feel good about themselves, or make them feel safe, the people they can ask for help. And you have them place them in circles depending on how physically close or far away they may be. Now, one of my daughters did that instinctively. I didn't provide that physically close instruction, and the other did that based on the people she feels emotionally closest to. So you can see that she put Gammy before Mom and Dad. That's okay. But anyway, this activity can help serve as a tangible reminder of all the important people in their lives. And it shows that you don't have to be right next to someone for them to love you and to support you. So maybe you can only talk to Grandma in Guatemala once a month, but she's still there with you. She's still supporting you. And this is an activity you can kind of incorporate into another activity we'll talk about later. On the next slide, you'll see the next domain of social emotional wellness I want to cover, and that's regulation. So regulation is the way we learn how to manage or control our thoughts, emotions, and energy. The human danger response, the express road, often creates the experience of going from 0 to 60 miles per hour in less than a minute. And you've probably seen that with your kids before. So when upsetting feelings occur, they can get very big very quickly. To manage your feelings effectively, you have to have some understanding of what those feelings are, where they come from, and you need the language to label, define, and organize what you're experiencing. So to help students do that, you can see on the next slide, one of the activities that we use, there are lots of different ones you can use to incorporate language and feelings, but our favorite is feeling charades. Those are pictures from one of my daughters quite a while ago, acting out silly and happy. But it's a really simple game. So you would have one child act out an emotion word, and the other players guess what it is. We love this game because it allows for several things. The first being that feelings may look different in different cultures or in different individuals. It gives the caregiver a chance to see what mad or worried or excited looks like to this particular child. If the other players are children, they're getting the opportunity not only to develop language for what they're feeling, but also to see how it looks when others have that feeling, which reinforces empathy, helps make attachment easier. Finally, this is a fun one to do with a class of English language learners because they're expanding their English vocabulary, and it also gives the child a chance to share feeling words in their home language. So it supports both home language and English acquisition. On the next slide, we have a video. So another great way to support kids in understanding what's happening in their bodies when they're dysregulated and to give them language for that is by using Dr. Dan Siegel's hand model of the brain. This video is going to explain, it's meant for caregivers or teachers. It explains how it's used. If you Google it, you can also find videos that are specifically meant for children to describe for them how to use this model. But this is something that we use in my house and we use in our programs, so that language of flipping your lid can be really helpful for children. So this is going to take a moment to load. Thank you for your patience. Okay, so if we can go on to the next slide, besides using that hand model of the brain, one of the things I wanted to make a note about is that with the children in our programs who've been exposed to complex trauma, we like to talk about energy. So energy is neutral, where for a lot of children, feelings might feel too loaded or too difficult to discuss. So one thing families can do every day, or that you can do with your classroom, is an energy check-in. So what you do is you could just draw a little thermometer, or you get a template, and then you tell the child you want them to think about their energy. So they could be on a scale from +10, where their hearts are racing and they're talking really fast and their hands and legs are moving, all the way down to -10, which is not just calm, but actually frozen or disconnected. And then you explain that while there's no such thing as good energy or bad energy, the level of energy we have might feel comfortable or uncomfortable in our bodies, or it might be a good match or a bad match for what we're trying to do. So when our energy is uncomfortable, or when it's a bad match for our bodies, that's when we want to consider taking steps to feel more comfortable. And the next slide outlines an activity we can use to support that, helping kids shift their energy. So something that you can do together is to build energy toolkits. We do these with every child in our program to help them regulate when their energy feels uncomfortable. So you would start by brainstorming tools for managing energy. You want ones that connect the senses, because that's what, when our feelings get big, it's our senses that are impacted. So there are some sample activities of things you can include, or breathing activities, along with just regular household items that might promote regulation and soothing. And remember that what comforts us can also be cultural. My daughters are from Ethiopia, and one of the items in one of their energy toolkits is a special incense burner incense that's used in Ethiopian coffee ceremonies. The smell is distinctive, and it is instantly calming for one of my girls when she's overwhelmed. So after you've gathered together items or made lists, you'll grab a container. You do not need to be fancy. A shoebox, a paper or plastic bag, an old Tupperware container. Any of that would be just fine, and then you can spend some time together decorating it. Then you just fill it with the items from your list and have the children use as needed. We use them a lot in transitions. Those tend to be hard points in our schedule, but anytime that a child needs to kind of shift the energy in their body so that it's more comfortable or a better match for what they're doing. On the next slide, we're talking about routines and rituals, because those are important strategies for regulation, and they've all been disrupted right now. So not only our daily routines, but also our special rituals. We've had Passover and Easter, some cultural New Year's celebrations. Ramadan is just starting, and those all come with these very comforting rituals that have been disrupted. So it's important to talk to children about those disruptions and to work together to create new routines and new rituals and have the children have a say in creating them. I also want to give a word of warning here for people like me. I am someone who loves routines and habits and systems, and I can be pretty relentless about them. And for people like me, it's easy to fall into a trap of putting too much focus on the routine and on getting things done in a certain way. So routines are important, they are good, and they are supposed to make your life easier. If the routine is adding stress, if it's making things harder for the child, if it's causing arguments, then I want to just say, please change your routine. And as you'll see on the next slide, it's important for caregivers to let children know when you're using your own regulation tools. Don't be afraid to say, okay, mom is feeling a little overwhelmed right now. I'm going to take a few deep breaths so that I can refocus. Also, you're going to lose your cool sometimes. None of us can do this perfectly 100% of the time. So when you get it wrong, apologize, make a repair. It's actually really powerful for children to see a model that we all mess up and that we can fix it, that it doesn't mean all is lost. In our programs, one of our mantras is it's not over until it's over. And it's not over until we've achieved all 3 C's. The child's behavior has been corrected or changed. The child is calm, and we are reconnected. So now we're going to look at our final domain, which is self-competency. The development of a self-concept, pride, identity, independence is a key developmental task. Identity and sense of self grow in layers over time and are built on things like, how are we seen and treated in relationships? Are we worthy or unworthy? Loved or unloved? How do we engage with the world and with our successes and failures? Are we capable or incapable? Powerful or weak? Our opportunities to explore in our range of experiences. Are we curious or stuck? Do we have a vision of the future, or we had no opportunities to develop that vision? Over time, our lens of self becomes the filter through which we interpret our experiences. So you may have seen before a child who sees themselves as smart, and that child fails a test. So then the child thinks, well, the test was tough. They had a bad day. They'll do better next time. But if you've ever had a child who sees themselves as stupid and they pass a test, what does the child think? They got lucky. That'll never happen again. So activities that encourage a sense of competency, that the child is able to learn new things, make good decisions, overcome challenges, are incredibly important to social and emotional well-being. One of the ways you build that sense of self-competency is by building a history of successes, no matter how small. Something a child can look back on and say, I didn't know how to do that at first, or it was scary, but I learned and now I'm good at it. So it's silly, but what comes to mind for me is the experience I had of getting contacts when I was in the 6th grade. I've had terrible eyesight for as long as I can remember, and I'd been wearing these huge thick glasses, and I was really excited to be allowed to get contacts. I mean, I remember that the appointment was on a Friday, and the doctor gave me the contacts, and I had to practice putting them in. I don't know how that goes now, but at the time, they wouldn't let you leave until you'd had the contacts in. So, like, no problem. I was wrong. I could not get those contacts in for the life of me. I missed my eyeball. I blinked them out. I couldn't do it. I felt dumber and more embarrassed with each try. My mom wanted to go home. My siblings who had been dragged out with me wanted to eat dinner. This poor doctor probably wanted to start his weekend. I was in that office for over 2 hours. It was dark when we left, but I got it. So of course now I can put them in seconds and without a mirror. I'm 40 years old, and putting in contacts is hardly the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life. But anytime I have to do something new that's hard or that seems impossible, I remember at Linguistically, remember how you couldn't put in contacts? So every time a child learns something new, sets a goal and achieves it, it's like my contact story. Their brain will pull it back out for them the next time they face something hard. And they'll build a sense of themselves as a person who can do hard things. And caregivers can help. You help by noting and saying out loud the strengths you see in a child, by giving specific compliments like, I love how you're so good at coming up with fun activities when we're bored, or I love how gentle you are with the dog. It's so great to see you decide what you want to do and then not let anyone talk you out of it. Or I saw how you got mad right there, but then you took a moment and came back calm. I'm really impressed. On the next slide, we can also see that now is the perfect time to start trying new things. Help children in setting manageable, accomplishable goals. Now, this doesn't mean like, let's decide your child is going to be a piano prodigy during this time when they've never played the piano before. Remember, we're still down in those bottom levels of safety and security, but something that they're interested in. And there's a list of ideas there. And then on the next slide, we can also see that this is the perfect time to use stories. So give us all the stories where the kids are the heroes right now. Here are some of the ones that we use at home and in our programs. This could be an extension of their daily literacy time or journal time. And I'm sorry, teachers out there, but you don't just have to use books. Go ahead and watch TV, watch movies, tell stories from your home country. But the key to this is to ask questions, to pause at important moments and ask, what if this character had made a different choice? What if it was you? What would you do? What do you think would happen? And then finally, our last activity is to have children tell their own stories. So an activity that's really great for helping particularly refugee and immigrant children who often have the experience of living between worlds, and that experience may or may not be layered with trauma. To help them develop a cohesive sense of identity and a narrative of their lives is creating a life book. Additionally, life books incorporate literacy and support cultural pride and integration. I've included a handout that gives more detailed instructions and includes some adaptations based on age. We talk about it in terms of a book, but again, you want flexibility right now, so it could be a book, it could be a collage, it could be a photography or film project, whatever suits the child's circumstances and interest. it's something that can be done over time. So generally, you'd start with the child creating a timeline of significant events in their lives, and the child gets to decide what's significant. Caregivers can help with filling in the blanks. They can match events with all the different places they've lived, and then they would put that in chronological order. Then you would go back through the book, have the child talk about and document their thoughts and feelings during each event. With older children, you can go even further into trying to connect the past to the present. What strengths help them cope? What people were there for them? How can they commemorate the people and places they've lost? There are also a few extensions you could add. I believe our next speaker is going to talk about daily interviews, which is something you could do to document the quarantine. And we've added a section on helping the child envision the future. So in American culture, we tend to focus on what jobs children want in the future, but we're also going to go beyond that and ask what kind of people they want to be. So again, it's something that they can, that's constantly developing with the child, and a tangible thing that can take with them and look back on. So that brings us to the end of my content. I hope you've gotten some ideas about activities you can do at home to support social and emotional well-being. I know we're cramming kind of a lot into a little bit of time. Here's my contact information if you have things that come up later, but now I'll turn it back over to Cal. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Wow, how amazing that whole presentation is. And I've found a lot of things that I'm going to use at my home for sure. So all of you all are aware, Jennifer does work at Catholic Charities of Tennessee. She is the Refugee Youth and Elder Services Supervisor. There she manages a refugee youth program that incorporates case management. It incorporates an after-school program. We're going to share with y'all ways that you might be able to support them through their Amazon wish list if you would like. The work that Jennifer and her staff are doing is unsurmountable. And personally, having worked under Jennifer and learning so much from her, the work she does is, and the person she is just amazing. So feel free to help support in that way via the Amazon wish list if you can. So to brief a little bit, what resonated with you? What activities are you planning on implementing at your families, in your families or with your students? Feel free to share out at this time via the question box. We're going to make it kind of quick. And I'll see kind of what you guys might be saying. Oh, some really great strategies to implement. Yes, thank you. The different levels of stress. Yeah, that definitely resonated with me too. The 5 minutes of joy. Yeah, I've already started making my list. Different levels of stress that we all go through. Absolutely. And it's needed to be reminded that if I'm going through stress, the children in my life are also going through stress. Energy toolkits. Yes. Thank you everyone so much. Feel free to keep sharing out. I'm going to pass this over to Annie, back to Annie at this time. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Chelsea, and thank you so much to Jennifer Eskew and so many great tools and just something simple, just always reminders for us as humans. I was going to say as professionals, as teachers, educators, social workers, parents, but really just everyone right now can use some reminders of some of these tools. So thank you for making making us aware of. I think sometimes we think, oh, this is for immigrant and refugee students and families, and for many of us that is our core work, but that's also makes it a universal experience in its nature. So thank you for that. And now I would like to introduce a personal friend, also a clinical psychologist at with Alberta Health Services in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. This is Dr. Alice Pritchard, and we're going to make sure audio works, and then I'll pass it off to her. Alice, are you able to chime in?
Hi, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you. Thanks, Alice.
Great. Okay, well, hello everyone. As Annie said, my name's Alice Pritchard. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I work in Calgary, Alberta, and in Canada. I've worked with lots of children with mental health disorders, learning disabilities, and other types of developmental needs. I primarily work in the health system, but I'm also a mother of 2 children and 2 young children. And right now, along with my partner, we're trying to keep calm while continuing to work and adjusting to a new home life with my children at home. And before this pandemic even happened, I just wanted to share with you that I often checked in with my children about how their days went. In particular, I would often ask the things they were grateful for about their day or things that didn't go so well. And this provided me a chance to kind of just see if there was anything that was on their mind, maybe something that they hadn't told me spontaneously when we were just chatting. And it also provided us and them an opportunity to think really carefully about how our days went and maybe appreciate something that we might not have really kind of noticed automatically. And so anyway, when this pandemic hit, I kind of wanted to keep doing this, but I thought that I would maybe expand it a little bit more. So I created a reflection journal for my children. And I think we can go to the next slide now. And so you can see here on the slide a couple of kind of versions of that journal. So the one that I first created was actually the one, if you're looking at your screen, it's one on the left, and it says, "My day of fun and learning at home." And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the different parts that I have on there and why I think they're important. And, you know, maybe you might find that helpful if you have children of your own, or even sharing it with some of the parents of some of your students. And the one at the right is just a slightly different version of the one that I created. And it has a little bit, some of the language is a bit different. There's a, you know, a couple extra questions. And so that might be something that for certain students that might be more appropriate. Maybe some that have more advanced English language skills, or even as an adult as yourself, this might be something that you might find helpful. So back to me and my family, given our new status at home, I thought it would be neat to sort of gather a bit more information from my kids beyond the couple of things I first started doing. And also by doing this, especially if we do it regularly, it's kind of like almost like having us a little time capsule, a little journal, a diary about what happened in our lives during the pandemic. And it might be nice to kind of reflect on that later. So one thing that I really truly value given my work, and I think that's really important for mental health, is social connectedness. And so I remember when we were all told that we had to stay inside our homes and couldn't really interact with anybody, I was really concerned about people's mental health, especially those who might be living alone or wouldn't really be able to get out and even see people sort of outside at a distance. So one of the things I chose to focus on in this journal was connecting with others. So that's that first bit that you can see kind of at the top of the journal pages, is who I connected with today. So thinking about, so you know, you could have check marks, you could have, like, we provided some suggestions, but it could be like obviously family members at home, but maybe with friends, because you could connect with friends maybe in a different way that isn't face-to-face. And even something like a pet. Pets can be really quite helpful in times of challenge like this. They can be really comforting, especially for kids. So my kids always like, we have a dog, and my kids always like to put her name there as something that they really value for them. And then I wanted them to think about things in their life beyond maybe the academics that we were kind of, that was like one of the biggest changes for us, is that my kids had to be doing their academics at home. And, you know, we have this list of all these things that we have to do, like the math and the reading. And of course, that's extremely important. But I really wanted them to be like thinking about other things that they did in their day that was really important. And these are things that are important for us every day, right? Things that are good for our bodies, things that made me think that that could be something like the academics. It's really important for us to use our imaginations and be creative, so I've included that. I wanted my kids to think about something that they might have done that was kind or helpful. I mean, this is something that I think we often do quite naturally, but don't always kind of like realize that we've done it, like kind of focused on that. And then, of course, something that made me fun or was fun or made me laugh. And we know that through the mental health world that if we're able to laugh and smile, our spirits are raised kind of automatically. For my kids, I'm always kind of helping them think about the way they feel about things. And so I have on one side some check marks about feelings, but then on the other version, you could just kind of come up with your own way to describe how you feel. And of course, even with the children, there's other options beyond what's there. And then with my kids, I always want to check in about something that didn't go so well. And something that sometimes that's a helpful thing to think about what didn't go so well, just to kind of think about if there's something you might want to do differently, or even just to kind of be like, yeah, that happened. I'm accepting that. Is there something I want to change about my day or not, and just kind of be with that and be open to that. And then there's a section for gratefulness. And gratitude is such an important piece when we're thinking about being able to kind of get some joy in times like this, right? It's sometimes really hard to be able to focus on joyful experiences when we're in such a crazy time, and there's so many things that we hear about in the news that are sad or frustrating or hard, but really trying to be really mindful about our days and is there anything that we can be really grateful for? And then similarly, kind of moving forward to the next day, is there something that I can do tomorrow? Either connecting with somebody tomorrow that maybe I'm thinking about and really making a conscious decision, writing it down and setting an intention for that, or is there something that I'm looking forward to? And if not, is there something that I can think about making as part of my day to be able to look forward to? And we know that by setting intentions and setting goals and then writing it down, that we're far more likely to really reach those goals. Yeah, so if we go to the next slide, there's just a couple of examples. These are ones that I filled out with my kids. I wrote most of it for them because that's just easier, but you know, obviously kids can write it themselves. And when I look back on this is from a few weeks ago, and it just kind of brings a smile to even myself, even though it's not about me, because it reminds me of some of the fun things we did on that day. And I really thought it was interesting because one of my son wrote that he really wanted to talk to someone about the coronavirus, and I had thought in my head at that point that he really wasn't that focused on it, and it wasn't a big deal for him. And that was really helpful for me, just to be like, oh, okay, well maybe we should check in about that. So it's kind of nice just because he hadn't mentioned that spontaneously. And then we can go to the next slide. And then there have been some people that have been so very gracious to translate some of these versions. So we have French, Spanish, and Polish translations. And so those are available in the handout. Yeah. So I think that's it for me.
Thank you so much, Alice. I did want to highlight again the translations. A couple of you already asked in the questions box, and so in your handouts within the control panel of your GoToWebinar, it turns out it looks a little bit differently on everyone's browsers, but there is a handout section there, and though we will end in a few minutes, that's a time right now if you want to go and download those. There's the breathing exercises. We did the bubble one together, but there's lots of great breathing exercises that Chelsea shared with us, and thank you for that. There's the daily reflection that Alice just shared with us in French, English, Spanish, and Polish. And I did want to highlight our translator. So the French version was a collaboration between Alice, myself, another colleague, Elsa Fraser, and Matilda Reckford, who we brought in to, it was kind of a fun challenge to get our translation and what do we mean by connection, and how do you say thankful in other languages. So we had some fun with that. Mary Bell did our Spanish language version, and note that she typed it out, as an adult, and maybe she didn't focus on, some of every part of the activity. And I think that's something that we could, suggest is it's not every day that we have time to fill out something like this. And so maybe it's just a few sections per day. I know that I went through it orally with my husband last night, and it was great to talk to him. I said, oh, I happen to memorize it now because I did it in to the translation, and I went through it, and I learned a little bit about his day, even though we're in the same house all day. How was he feeling? And I learned that we also donated some of our toilet paper to our neighbors, and so that made us laugh and also made us feel good as helpful neighbors. And hopefully I'll look back on that someday. And so also Maria, a mother-daughter team here, Maria and her mother, Cici Cislak, developed the Polish version of this. So we just did a few languages that we had on our team, and we actually left it as a word translation. If you would like to make the translation, we'd love to see it. So please do send it back our way through the solutions@cal.org, and make sure Alice gets a copy of that as well. So we don't really have much time. I've seen a lot of comments in the questions box, and I know my colleagues are getting to those, but many of you are asking about how to download. Yes, you can download all of these activities right now. We'll also put the slides, and this archived webinar will be available to you at our website, and the same link that we shared in the past. You can feel free to continue adding your ideas, which of these activities. So far, I've seen all of them. I've seen the circle, concentric circles, and the life stories, and the daily journal, and some of the toolkits, and the bubble breathing, and all those activities. I've seen everyone with interest in implementing them. So we're so grateful again to Jennifer Eskew from Catholic Charities, to Dr. Pritchard for sharing your versions that you worked on with your own children, and to Chelsea for leading us through that very relaxing bubble breathing. I did just want to highlight a few things, our upcoming topics. So you are going to, in your tickets out, you'll receive in just a moment, one on assessment. So our colleagues Meg Monty and Jamie Morgan will be joining us next week to look at, this is a nice time of year to think about, well, how can we develop assessment plans and make sure that we have the information we need about students' language progressions, and where students may be right now, so that when we come back to school, whatever format that may be in the fall, that we're ready to advance our students' language development. So that will be next Friday. We have one on re-energizing the brain, looking at language, arts, and physical education and music, May 8th. May 15th, we'll come back to our content area, social studies, and think about culture, geography, and the world around us. And before we head off on May 29th, we'll look at, again, come back to wellness, but sort of in a way of supporting ongoing learning and health over the summer, in terms of outdoor activities, hopefully as well. So again, this is the same link here on the Cal site where you can find this archived webinar. And these are our dual language and multilingual topics that are coming right up. As I mentioned at the start of the webinar, this is a newer series. It's been in development, but just promoting it now, and we'll circle back with more information. But there's May 5th webinar specifically that will be delivered in Spanish by our colleague, Dr. Artea Goitia, and that will be delivered entirely in Spanish about the development of Spanish language and literacy, and then a few specific webinars on dual language programming, Spanish language and literacy development, and then SIOP and dual language programs. So we know some of you are working in bilingual and dual language programs. Lastly, I think we have some online courses, and again, we will share these slides back on the website, and we will be coming out with new information. And the next time that we meet, we will hope to have this new course launched on building background and comprehensible input, so supporting our English learners. And these courses are all 5 hours of course time. and do offer a certificate that can be used for continuing ed credits. So I do want to say a couple questions popped up about certificates for this webinar, and if you are participating live, you will receive within a day an email with a few links, this link to our, where you'll find the archived webinar, and you'll also get a certificate for your participation. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to our guests, Jennifer and Alice and Chelsea, and to our translators. And thank you all, and please stay well and healthy, and we'll look forward to meeting again in a week, same time, same place, on language assessment. Thank you all. Have a wonderful weekend.